administración va a hacer muchas personas feliz en la ciudad de Nueva York.
Gracias.
A la orden.
I hope so. I hope so.
And having been at the other side, I definitely know so. It's just the right way, the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's going to make brokers happy. It makes everybody happy.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
council members, we started the live stream. So at this time, will all sergeants please start the recordings?
Computer recording started.
Thank you.
Our recording is up.
Thank you.
Backup is rolling.
Thank you. Sergeant Bradley, with your opening statement, please.
Yes, good afternoon and welcome to today's New York City Council vote on general welfare. At this time, will all members please turn on your videos for verification process? Thank you, Chair. We may begin.
Thank you very much, Sergeant. Good afternoon, everybody. I have my kids' gavel here. Gavel in. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today with all of you to vote on Intro 146C here in the General Welfare Committee. This is legislation that we introduced back in 2018 that would increase the city FEPS voucher rate to a rate that someone can actually find an apartment here in New York City. You know, the history of what this city has done for people in shelter when it comes to vouchers is not a history of success. It's not. We've had program after program that has been undermined by the city and the state, having unfair limitations placed on it. And the people that pay the price for that are people in shelter who just want to be able to get into permanent housing and get their foot in the door. And you know, I do give credit to this administration for creating a new program where one didn't exist for the last 3 years of the Bloomberg administration, when Advantage was discontinued in 2011. Between then and 2014, there was no program, no voucher program for people to get out of shelter. And that's when we saw a significant increase in the shelter population, particularly among families. When this administration did create the LINK program in 2014, 2015, it was cumbersome. It was dealing with the fallout from the Advantage debacle, and it needed to be it needed to work, and it was set at a very low rate to pay for apartments. That continued when the city moved to city FEPS, which is the current iteration of the voucher. And the problem is, at least one of the problems, and I think the main problem with the voucher in terms of its effectiveness, and we know that it's not very effective based on data, is that for every voucher, the value is pegged at far below fair market rent, hundreds of dollars below fair market rent. And as we all know, in New York City, there are no vacancies at those discounted rent levels. There are no vacancies. And so for every person that has a voucher to get out of shelter, they're all searching for a handful of apartments throughout New York City in maybe a handful of neighborhoods. And it is a disgrace what we have done. It is a disgrace because we have given people hope by giving them this voucher and telling them that this will be their exit out of shelter, but we have handicapped that voucher to the point where it's not it's not at all usable. And so that is going to change with this bill, and this bill will increase that voucher level to the Section 8 voucher level, and it will make a meaningful impact in terms of the number of units that are available for voucher holders. Just to give an example, Street Easy a couple of weeks ago did an analysis and showed that because of the pandemic, with a softening in the rental market in New York City, the number of available units for a Section 8 voucher went up from about 29,000 to over 70,000 from 2019 to 2020. As an economist named Nancy Wu that did that report. I reached out to Ms. Wu and I asked her if she could do an analysis of CityFEP's levels, and she showed that with those levels, there were 564 apartments available on Street Easy compared to the almost 72,000. So that's what we're talking about here. It's just we're giving people the opportunity to get out of shelter and a place to go, and the means to get there. I want to thank all of my colleagues that have been supportive of this legislation. I want to thank, in particular, I want to thank Speaker Johnson, who from the outset has been supportive of this legislation. And this spring, when we saw ourselves climbing out of COVID, with the help of federal stimulus dollars, really made it a priority to get this done. And so I give him a lot of credit for that. And I want to thank him for his support. I want to thank Jason Goldman, our chief of staff. Jason has been steadfast in these recent weeks in support of this legislation and making sure that the heart of it comes through and gets passed. I want to thank committee staff, Crystal Pond, Natalie Omari, Aminta Kilowan, who have done just a tremendous amount of work on this. Frank Sarno from our finance division, Dohini Sampura, our unit head, deputy director Regina Pareto Ryan, and our finance director Latanya McKinney. I also want to acknowledge Louis Cholton Brown and Andrea Vasquez in our legislative division. And in particular, I want to thank the advocates who have really prioritized this bill and called attention to this issue. I want to thank Christine Quinn, our former speaker, and her team at WIN, who've done an amazing job of calling public attention to this issue. Neighbors Together, Vocal New York, Safety Net Project, Urban Justice Center Safety Net Project, Josh Dean at Human NYC, and Lyndon Bond, Giselle Ruthier, and let's see, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. I'm seeing everyone's name here. I just want to thank Coalition for the Homeless, Legal Aid Society. Let's see if there's more. I think that is everybody. Beth Hoffmeister and Josh Goldfein. This was it was a lot of work that went into this, and it was not easy. And I just want to thank everybody for Jackie Simone from Coalition as well. It was not easy to do all of this, and so I just want to thank everybody for investing the time and energy into this to make this a reality. And also I just want to in particular thank Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, who I know has been just a stalwart in support of this legislation. So thank you, Vanessa, and Councilmember Dharma Diaz as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. This is the May 26th, 2021 General Welfare Committee roll call vote on proposed intro 146C. Chair Levin, we'll start with you.
I vote aye.
And Council Members Lander,
Request permission to explain my vote. Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Levin, I just want to say a big congratulations to you. You have been fighting for this for years, and you saw long before this pandemic how urgent it was to raise the city FEPS level. So folks could get out of shelter, and long before the pandemic, but boy, right now for sure, there's almost no issue that's as important as enabling homeless New Yorkers to get off the streets and out of shelters and into housing. And we've done almost nothing to make that happen in recent years, despite seeing it. And this is really the most practical, the most immediate thing that we can do. And it's going to have an enormous impact in the lives of families and in the life of our city. So I want to thank you for your fierce advocacy. And then just, the advocacy groups who have been fighting for this are a remarkable crew. So to Vocal and the Safety Net Project and Coalition for the Homeless and Legal Aid and Human.nyc, standing up for homeless New Yorkers is really amongst the most important things anybody is doing. So thank you for all of it, and I proudly vote aye.
Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you. Permission to explain?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I want to join Councilmember Lander in expressing my extreme gratitude and appreciation to you, Chair Steve Levin. You have been an incredible leader during this time, and certainly recognizing that Intro 146 is going to have a transformative impact for many homeless New Yorkers in our city. And certainly many who have been impacted by COVID-19, our very own constituents that really need the support. When you talk about the city FEPS voucher and making sure that its value recognizes COVID-19 and the fact that so many families are rent burdened. Many of them are paying 30%, over 30% of their income towards rent, and many are struggling for basic necessities. We always talk about the faces of homelessness, and they are everyday New Yorkers that look like us, that come from our communities, and many of them are working full-time. They have a full-time job, but they simply cannot afford the rents of our city. And if we're going to have a city that is affordable to everyone, no matter where you come from, no matter what your zip code is, nor how much you have in your bank account, it is initiatives like this, raising the value of city FEPS, that recognize that we have to provide equity in this system. So I want to thank again all of the housing advocates and many of my own groups in the Bronx, like Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition and Casa Bronx, who have been at so many rallies and demonstrations and Zoom calls, really making their voices heard on behalf of homeless New Yorkers who we must protect. So Steve, you've been amazing, and I know you have never given up on anything you start. And so I'm glad to see Intro 146 come across the finish line. This is truly a victory for so many of our brothers and sisters that need our support. And I'm so proud to be a part of this effort and support this bill. I proudly vote yes on Intro 146, making sure that we continue to do our part as a city council. Thank you so much, Chair Levin, and thank you to all the advocates.
Thank you, colleague. Thank you.
Councilmember Reynoso. Councilmember Grodenchik.
I want to congratulate Chair Levin. We stood at some press conferences when no one else was around, Steve, and when we couldn't even get the steps of City Hall to push this legislation. And I want to congratulate you for your perseverance and for today taking a step to make New York City just a little bit fairer for all the people who live here. So with that, I vote aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Grodenchik.
Councilmember Salamanca.
Congrats, Chair Levin, and aye on all.
Councilmember Dharma Diaz.
Permission to explain my vote? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, from the bottom of my heart, from the tip of my toes, to all the gray hairs that I've earned throughout my legacy of advocating for housing, for the 13 years that I spent as a case manager, program after program. I definitely believe this is the best. I thank you. I thank all my colleagues that are stepping out the box. I know that it's a financial hit for New York City, but just think of all the positive outcomes we're going to have, all the little people that are going to have a place to call their home. Again, thank you. Thank you, New York City, for standing tall. I'm proud and I'm honored to be a part of this conversation, this process. I can go back to my 20 families that are still living in the shelter that I left 5 months ago and say, we're with you. Promises made, promises kept. Thank you. Thank you, my colleagues in government.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Reynoso.
Congrats, Steve. Good job to everyone. Great piece of legislation. This is why we're here. I vote aye on all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Levin, intro 146C is adopted by a vote of 8 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ettrick. And I just want to thank all my colleagues once again, staff that worked on this. And lastly, I just want to thank all of the homeless New Yorkers that have pushed us on this legislation and have pushed us on this issue and have raised their voices and made sure that we heard them and continue to advocate and will continue to advocate beyond this for a fairer city and a city that recognizes our collective humanity. And I think that I'm very honored to be a part of this with you all. And with that,
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. The vote is actually 7 in the affirmative, not 8.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all, colleagues.